After sin, did God remove from Adam and Eve original grace and all the consequences that come with it? Well, the answer is yes. And it's something real. So to understand it, one must remember what it is that the original grace and this image of a fountain of champagne as we see in weddings with a glass at the top. We pour the champagne, it flows in the glasses of the floor below and then in the floors below, more and more wide, so that all the glasses are filled. It was like this, with Adam and Eve, the presence of God made their intelligence bright, their will perfectly free, so that their psychology, on the next floor, was entirely obedient to their spirit and floor below, that their bodies were perfectly healthy and even immortal since God would have come to fetch them before their death. Still, even more so, nature itself was in harmony with them, so radiant were they with this grace of the presence of God. God removes His presence, it is the glass above. There is no champagne left. And suddenly, all floors are reached. For intelligence, they immediately begin to ignore what God was. Yet they frequented Him a few minutes before. But right now, they are afraid of it. They are afraid of His reaction, of His revenge. They hide themselves from their presence, says the text of Genesis, in the garden. Their will itself becomes undermined. It means that while their command was to love this God they knew, since they frequented Him and loved each other, they began to accuse each other of sin. Adam says, "It was Eve who deceived me." Eve says it's the snake that cheated on her. They do not assume their responsibilities. Their will becomes false, treacherous. Another consequence is their psychology. She no longer obeys entirely. Except they partly master it, but like a disobedient horse. They make the same experience. They discover that they are naked. What does it mean? Well, while naturally they were pure in front of each other, they start to feel animal desires that make them ashamed, because that's not it, to go from a very large floor holiness to, I would say, such bestiality, at least desires within their hearts, makes them ashamed. So they dress. Another consequence in their biological body, which becomes fragile, capable of falling sick. Their health diminishes. There are even consequences in the Bible delivery, you will give birth in pain. We must first see a spiritual sense. Eve will give birth to children who will kill each other. But there is also a physical sense, the body is reached and it is reached until the physical death happens because God does not come to seek them, their immortality is thus disappeared. It is the natural laws of biology that are exercised. They do not have an assumption, as the Virgin Mary will know it later. Finally, the last floor, nature becomes hostile. The animals that respected them, who were fascinated by the light emanating from them flee them, actually flee them. They can even attack them. Nature no longer delivers its fruits like that. They will be confronted with all this. And why God allows all this while He could have left the original grace and its consequences? Because, suddenly, humanity will be populated by people, very few, freely wicked, very few people, freely good, and the majority of poor people who wander with their weaknesses, fighting against their own impulses, and so who discover during a lifetime that they need a savior.